John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave, while weep the sons of bondage whom he ventured all to save. But though he sleeps, his life was lost while struggling for the slave. His soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory,
Welcome
glory,
to War of the Rebellion, Stories of the Civil War. I'm your host, Leon, and this is a reading of The History of the 72nd Indiana Volunteer Infantry of the Mounted Lightning Brigade, written and compiled by B.F. McGee. Chapter 5. August 18th to August 19th. Crossing the Ohio. March through Louisville to Oakland. Ammunition issued. Load guns the first time. Night ride to Lebanon with incidents. First cooking in Dixie. Into Camp Lucy Carson. Summing up results. Arrived at Jeffersonville, we tumbled out of the old cars, as bruised and limpy as any lot of pigs or calves ever shipped over that rough road. As we tried to get the string halts and kinks out of our limbs and come into some sort of line, we noticed a small, smoothly shaven, elderly man, mounted on a very quiet horse. The old gentleman wore a linen coat, a white hat, indefinite, colored pantaloons, and a carbine strapped about his shoulders. He rode up and down the front of the regiment, and squinted at us as if trying to ascertain how many there were of us. He spoke a time or two to Major Kirkpatrick, and seemed to know one or two others in the regiment. We came to the conclusion that he was a wealthy old Unionist who lived in the suburbs of the city. Followed squirrel hunting as a pastime, had heard of our coming, and had come to invite us to breakfast. "Who is the old ski-six?" asked some of us of the Major. "Why, that's our general, Ebenezer Dumont. You must be careful how you talk about him," replied the Major. It was General Dumont, and though the brave man now sleeps the sleep that knows no waking, it is not derogatory to his memory as a brave soldier, and a wise and witty man, to say that there were numbers of our boys who had never seen a live general before, and to them he was a terrible disappointment in size, dress, and style. "Why, I'd look that well myself on old Black, with Dad's squirrel gun," said Pony Ashley. From the cattle cars, we were marched to the river to see the ferry boat pulling out for Louisville, leaving us to stand in the sun for full an hour. We were hungry, thirsty, tired, sleepy, sore, and faint. Finally, the ferry boat is here. It is the old Isaac Bowman, and we proceed to board her pell-mell and stretched out on the decks for a little smooth rest. Just as we got down on the floors with our heads on our knapsacks, our limbs spread out, and began to think of feather beds, home, and Mother's delicious coffee. The steam calliope of the boat began to howl, "Home, sweet home," like a big boy baby lost in the woods and crying for his mama. Was it a wonder that some of the boys, and married men were boys also, turned their hands over their eyes and shed a tear or two? William R. Stewart said he believed the engineer was a rebel and wanted to make us all too homesick to be able for service, but the 72nd had started for rebeldom and was determined to go. No spavin ever came limping from the stables more haltingly, or feeling and looking more woe-begone, than did the 72nd from the Bowmen. Their feet touched Dixie soil with but a slight thrill. As they fell into line, every motion was slow and dull, and indicative of exhaustion. Without ceremony, each company formed in the best order possible, and followed into the dusty, hot, narrow streets of Louisville. Our regimental musicians furnished their best marching music. In a trice, the street windows and doors were thronged with people, and in many places, the housetops were loaded, who greeted us with hearty cheers of welcome. Stars and stripes were flung out, and waved from many windows. The limps and lags left the regiment in a twinkling, and the men became erect and elastic, and greeted the stars and stripes displayed by the people with round after round of applause. The Negroes and whites were about equally divided, and while the demonstrations of the whites were very hearty, those of the Negroes were often extravagant and ludicrous. Almost the entire march of 5 miles was an ovation, and had it not been for dust, heat, and thirst, would have been rather pleasant, while this hearty reception of the Louisvillians was a stimulus. For we had supposed that city to be a den of rebels. It could not prevent the heat, dust, and thirst from causing us great distress. To Broadway we marched through very narrow streets, and could get no water, for it was scarce, and the men had no time to fall out and look for it. We mention with pleasure that the Louisville people, when they found out how terribly we were suffering from thirst, made haste, and got buckets full of water, and ran after the regiment, and gave the men to drink. In spite of this, some were smitten by the heat, and tumbled over the curbstones and against the fences. B.F. McGee fell from a sunstroke, the blood bursting from his mouth and nose in streams, which doubtless kept him from smothering. He rallied and came up at Oakland. Under our new uniforms, knapsacks, and guns, this 5 miles was one of the hardest, most painful marches the regiment ever made, and its memory is yet full of horror for some of the comrades. 6 men never got further than this place. Oakland, a station in the suburbs of Louisville, on the Louisville and Nashville Railroad, was reached at 2 p.m. The order was to get something to eat, immediately, which many of the men could not do from sheer exhaustion and blistered feet. Since they had put on their new army shoes, they had made 2 hard marches and had not had time to take them off. And now their feet was so galled, blistered, and skinned that locomotion was very painful. Water and fuel were quite scarce. Little coffee was made. Most of us lay down, took a slice of raw SB upon a hardtack from our haversacks, and with our heads on our knapsacks ate it. And it was sweeter in de honey, or de honey gum, as de black man said of de possum. While composing ourselves for a nap, or to write a few lines home, the order was given to cook 2 days' rations, and be ready to move at a moment's notice. Speedily following this order, a lot of ammunition was dumped into the camp, accompanied by an order to draw 20 rounds of ammunition to the man. We had expected to remain here a few days, rest, drill, and become more fully inured to camp life. But these orders put an end to this hope, and we knew we were to soon be off to some point requiring the immediate aid of troops. The afternoon was made busy with opening ammunition boxes and issuing this first ammunition to the men, with distributing to them their canteens and getting the 2 days' rations provided, and with almost everyone writing a brief line home and informing anxious friends of the situation. At 5 p.m., we were ordered out to the railroad to take the train. Presently, General Dumont rode up, ordered us to load up our pieces, but not to cap them. Previous to taking the train, he told us that we were going to Lebanon, Kentucky, that Morgan had lately captured a garrison there, and we had to go down to attend to him. After delivering this order and information, he rode away very leisurely. Here we waited for the cars. Every toot or whistle of locomotive or steamer elicited the remark, "Here they come." Nature overcame some, and stretched on the ground or leaning against trees, they snored like steamboats. A soldier of Company B lay sound asleep on the flat of his back, some 3 rods from the track. One leg drawn up and the other resting on it, his foot sticking up 3 feet high. Captain Carr was also asleep near the soldier. The cars came thundering along. Captain Carr took fright, jumped up, ran against the soldier's exalted foot, turning him a somerset, the captain pitching 10 feet, falling on his belly like a frog, trotted off on his all fours 3 rods to a tree, ran behind and threw his arms around it, while his eyes bugged out like saucers. The impression was that the captain was frightened in his sleep. The cars drew up, and we were commanded to load our pieces before entering the cars, but not to cap. This was the first time our regiment ever put powder and ball into their pieces. Considering all things, it was well and quickly done, and we were soon on the cars. It was another mixed train with a large number of dirty cattle cars. Narrow boards were laid at right angles on boxes for our seats, giving each man a space of about 6 inches to put his feet and legs through to the floor. This was so miserable, and worse than no seats at all. That much of it was cast out of the cars soon after starting. Off into the darkness of Kentucky woods and hills we shoot, at a terrible speed, for the first 20 miles. The road is so rough that at times the cars seem to stand still like mad mules trying to throw their riders, and jump straight up and come down stiff-legged. Crash came a fearful bounce that almost pitched us through the tops and ends of the cars. The train had run over something or run off the track and stopped almost at once. We had run over a piece of timber, put on the track by the rebels to wreck the train. As soon as this was ascertained, many of the men capped their guns quietly without orders. They felt certain that if rebels put the timber on the track, they might be in force in the vicinity and ready to attack us if the train was thrown from the track. Men had been seen standing near the track at several places, with guns in their hands, and some of our boys at first took them for rebels, but soon became certain they were Union soldiers guarding the track. The engineer got scared, and would go no further without a guard to go before the train some distance, to see if there were any more obstructions. The guard was furnished, and marched in front of the train. Each bridge was inspected before crossing, and the remainder of the trip was made with caution. It was well known that Morgan was on the wing, and that a new regiment was a tempting bait to him. When the train stopped after running over the rail or timber, the 72nd boys did their first foraging. Some of them expressed the belief that the people near that place had put the obstruction on the track, that they were rebels, and their stuff ought to be confiscated. They sallied forth, capturing a lot of butter, apples, peaches, chickens, potatoes, geese, and etc. Often as the train poked along after the guard, these boys, who had been nearly used up that day, revived by the cool night air, would leap from the train, shoot off to a house, and bring in something refreshing to the inner man. You see how naturally they took to soldiering in Dixie, and how deftly they did it. They improved to the end of the war. As the sun pushes his fiery face above the forest of the train, slowly poled into Lebanon. We have been 5 hours in running some 65 miles. We left the cattle cars and marched on to a common, rank with dog fennel and smartweed, but bare of a shrub or tree to shelter from the sun, whose heat intensified as he ascended the clear sky. We looked at Lebanon with a deep interest, as we knew we were to defend it, and knew that Morgan had captured a Union force there a short time before and burned part of the town. The chimneys were standing like exclamation points after his dashing deeds. we were ordered to stack arms and get breakfast on the Dog Fennel Common. It was a joyful sound to the weary and hungry, but here were a few difficulties in the way of its execution. First, there were not 3 men in each company on an average who knew how to stack arms. Adjutant Rice, the patient father of the regiment, came down the line and showed the boys how to accomplish that military feat. And soon there was a row of stacked rifles in front of the regiment, bayonets gleaming in the sun, of which the men felt proud. Ranks were broken, and the next difficulty was encountered. Wood and water. Where were they to be had? The men displayed their native genius in this case, needing no assistance from any officer. Some went for the water, and some for the wood. And they brought both. "Well, those sticks look very much like rails," said Captain Pinkerton to Lieutenant, as Lieutenant tossed half a dozen dry sticks about 10 feet long from his shoulder. "Yes, they do, Captain, but they are not," replied the lieutenant. "They are sticks from the abolition tree which grows down here. It grows up in this shape without limbs, leaves, or sap, and all you have to do is go and get it." "Ah, that's good. The Lord provides for all emergencies. Come show me where it grows," said the captain, "and I'll go with some of the boys and fetch a load also." And so he did. The captain was a most devout and practical elder in the Presbyterian Church, and quickly discerned the hand of Providence in all his works. The smoke of abolition wood ascended towards the skies, bearing the perfume of sow-belly and coffee that morning. And we must think it pleased him who ruleth in justice, even if the old rebels did make discords on the air, with their dams about the Yankees burning up their rails. When the coffee was poured from boilers into tin cups, it was immediately discovered by thousands of little weed hoppers. After vain efforts to skim them off and keep them out, the men yelled out, "Well, we can stand it if the bugs can," and drank it, bugs and all. 'Twas death to the bugs, but refreshing to the soldiers. We remained on this common in the scorching sun, whose heat came down with a scorching, sickening power until noon. Many were overpowered by heat and forced to seek protection from it. The diarrhea on that day began its malignant attack on the regiment, and many became quite ill. At noon, when the stoutest began to fail, as they sweltered in their uniforms, an order was given to march, we knew not where, but were soon informed that we were to go into camp near town. We marched up through Lebanon, and from the windows and some houses the stars and stripes were displayed. On this march, many began to fail, and their guns and knapsacks were seized and carried by their stronger comrades to enable the failing ones to keep up with the regiment. This noble charity, of comrade sharing strength with comrade and bearing each other's burthens, began the day in the withering heat, and lasted to the end of the war. Well, we know that many noble deeds of this sort shine like gems on the pages of the recording angel's book. At 1 p.m., we drew up in line in our new camp, were assigned grounds and ordered to pitch tents. It was Hood's Meadow, cleanly mown and reflecting the sun from the bright surface as from a mirror, intensifying the heat. Not a tree or object to give shelter was near. In the oppressive heat, the weary men began to pitch tents and perform the other duties of camp, getting wood and water, digging sinks, doing guard duty, and etc. Our regiment was General Dumont's whole brigade when we reached Lebanon, and had a vast deal of hard work to do, and considerable responsibility resting upon it. By night, matters were in tolerable shape, and except the men who were on guard duty, there were never a lot of mortals slept more soundly. Exhaustion was about complete. We should remark that in almost every tent there was one or more sick men. While we rest a little here, let us sum up and see if there has not been enough to make men sick. On the 16th, at Indianapolis, we were ordered to cook 2 days' rations and be ready to march at noon. We had not been mustered or drawn anything. The hard work occupying day and night of the 16th and 17th has been told. Then followed the march from camp to the Indianapolis depot in new shoes and new shirts, under enormous loads. The ride to Jeffersonville, the march through Louisville, the night ride to Lebanon, the march to this camp, and the hard work of setting it in order done this afternoon. 3 days and nights of incessant work and hard marching, with little to eat and less sleep. Is it a wonder we left men exhausted all along the way? Is it a wonder that numbers are sick and groaning tonight, and that some are in the hospital over there in Lebanon? There were 62 men died or discharged before the end of the first year, and most of them from the effects of that rough initiation. There is little or no grumbling. The men take it as a matter of course. They know soldiering is severe, and nothing is worse than they expected. Yet it wears them out rapidly. We rest, and like the old fellow who had lost his coon dog, his fish hooks, his gun, shot pouch, and powder horn, we thank the Lord that is no worser with us than it is. Chapter 6, which we will finish up next week. Let's get into these show notes, and I have an announcement to make at the very end. So, the first note I wanted to write about was after they arrive at the station, they're all weary and sad, and they see General Dumont for the first time, and they call him Ski Six. This is a term I was wholly unfamiliar. I had never seen anything like it. Not even an offshoot of it. I had no idea what it meant. This is a slang term that means to be a rascal, a rogue, or a contemptible fellow. So, that's a new term we just learned. Ski Six. You are a Ski Six. All right. Even better is just all of these new soldiers gawking at some older guy and then finding out it is a general. What a sight that must be, and very adorable as far as how a lot of this works out. And to be fair, McGee says that none of the boys have ever seen a live general before. And also, to be fair, I only ever saw one once as well, on our way to Afghanistan, I think. So, he gave out challenge coins. Anyway, I also want to take a moment to focus on BF McGee, who gives himself a shout out in this chapter, where he gets sunstroke, and he says blood explodes out of his face, and he still kind of recovers and then meets up with the rest of the soldiers later. Super hardcore. Heat stroke is incredibly dangerous. I know a Marine who died and then was brought back to life from heat stroke. Now, after this, right afterwards, he wrote about how the food they ate was as good as African Americans eating possums. So I dutifully started looking at the Library of Congress and a couple of other sources, and I found something called Opossum Crisp and Brown, The Opossum and American Foodways. It was posted by Stephen Winnick. It is all about the possum and America. It's a great read. At first I was wondering if the writing McGee was using was maybe like a racist caricature or something. I don't think that's the case. I'm not sure where the line itself comes from, if he just wrote it up or if he found it somewhere. But I found other writings by Black Americans from this time period that are very similar to how he wrote it. So I'm not sure if it's a direct quote or not. I did try a keyword search and I wasn't able to find anything directly on the internet related to it. So I'm unsure about what the intention was. But apparently the possum range ends right at the Mason-Dixon line at this time period. And as you will read in this blog and a couple of other things I'm going to post, it was a huge part of slave life. And that all of the best possum hunters and cooks were all African American slaves. So much so that they would go out after slavery had ended and go find African American cooks to cook possums for big events. It also includes a song by an African American singer named Henry Touvillion, who was a railroad track crew supervisor. And this information comes from easttexashistory.org. They had made, not the website, but another gentleman, 50 recordings of music and calls, and he sings a possum song in one of them. So I will include both of these sections in the show notes so you can go check them out, especially the music. The music is on the Library of Congress and East Texas, so you can listen to them both. Very interesting. It is distinctly great Americana. I absolutely loved going down this rabbit hole. And apparently there is a whole list of possum songs, so by all means, come check them out. It's going to be in the show notes. I know those of you who live in the South are probably screaming at me right now. But it apparently is, to be a true American, you must eat some roast possum. There's some really great recipes in there. I don't think I'm going to try it anytime soon, but I did find some folks who do sell possum meat. So maybe if we do a War of the Rebellion meetup at some point, we will get some possum. I think would be really fun and entertaining. Now, moving on. I am not aware, but we find out at about 16 minutes in, that abolition trees grow down south. I didn't know that. And I also didn't know that they had pre-cut firewood. I found that snark immensely entertaining. However, I think farmers probably throughout the South were quite tired of having their fences taken down by marauding armies and used for firewood, replacing them and then only for more soldiers to come through. And I mean, it just made me think of some of the places where armies crisscrossed back and forth, where they would change hands 4 or 5 times. There must have been no fence rails at all in some of those areas. So it was just something I started to think about. All right. Also, a key line that they keep talking about in this section is the troops getting sick for the first time. Thank God. Literally, for vaccines. So many troops are killed by disease that now you just get vaccinated for in the military. In boot camp, you just travel down a row of corpsmen, and they just stick you in the arms on either side with all the vaccines that you need. With the crowning achievement of the peanut butter shot in the butt cheek, which is good old penicillin. And anyone who's ever been to boot camp fondly remembers that, right? Anyway, I'm just so glad that the elevated illness or levels of illness are just so much more reduced for American fighting men and women. Because, folks, where else do you get to snort flu shots? Am I right, my fellow GWAT vets? So, it's just something that I noticed is, even as modern day soldiers, even though we're bigger, taller, stronger, faster, we can carry more weight, some of the hardships that soldiers previously had to go through are just non-existent now. And I think that might be true for things just as far back as World War II veterans or Vietnam veterans. I mean, we carry more gear, but a lot of it is body armor. And it's kind of hard for me. I don't think I would want to fight a war without body armor. And I find the fact that these guys had to do it in lines shooting at each other is very courageous on a level that we just don't have to deal with anymore. Part of that advancement in society that comes along with that, with technology. So, all right. The last couple of things that I wanted to talk about. I am graduating at the end of this winter quarter, I should say, getting my AA, and I have been accepted into my 4-year university of choice. What that means is initially I will let you guys know, might be some interruption in the podcast and other related materials because I have to move. I am leaving my house and moving to go to school. My lovely fiance and our dog is coming with us, which is really nice. But just wanted to let you guys know. It's good news. I'm very excited. I'm very happy. so I'm just excited for this new chapter in my life. And of course, you can probably guess, I'm looking at an undergraduate degree in American Studies. And I'm very excited at the school that I have has a lot of unique programs that I'll be able to learn a lot about. So very happy, very excited. And I will keep you guys updated if anything comes up that is regarding that. But just know that over the next maybe 2 years, I will be working very diligently to get that finished up and get my degree done. So, all right. I am posting more stuff to the YouTube channel. Not all of it is related to the podcast. I'm doing a series on the American Civil War mod for Napoleon Total War, where a great many very talented modders are building all of the individual armies that existed during the American Civil War. And if you don't know what Napoleon Total War is, it is a mod that allows, or it is a game, a computer game, that allows you to control in real time regiments instead of individual soldiers. They've modded the game so that you're playing in the American Civil War. It's a multiplayer only. But each faction is controlled, or each army is a specific army in time. So if you go and look at the first couple of videos I've posted, you will see that the reviews are about the Army of Northeastern Virginia as it attacked the Confederates at Bull Run. And the other two reviews I've done are the 1st and 2nd Corps at the battles as they showed up at the Battle of Antietam in their kind of correct placement on the map, mostly. But what's so important about you can play on the largest troop count size, and those large troop count sizes are the correct sizes of the regiment. So you can actually play as the 1st Corps, usually about a division scale, maybe a little bit larger. Maybe like a large division, I guess is the best way to put it. But, with 2 players, you can play the correct troop count sizes and the correct units at the 1st Corps' attack at Antietam with the correct troops, the correct regiments. They're wearing the correct uniforms. They have the correct weapons. A ton of work has gone into this. So come check it out if you like. I also have a couple of battles that we've done with some of the guys on the Discord. If you like American Civil War games and you've wanted something that was a little bit different, this is something that you can come take a look at. I have a mod about the game and a couple of other stuff. Anyway, I've been talking too long about it. It's very exciting. I'm also doing some other videos. I'm doing a Let's Play video on Empire 2 Total War, where we were playing as the Sun King of France, and I'm going to instill Catholic domination across Western Europe, whether the Austrians like it or not. So you can come take a look at that. It's going to be out probably later today. So my friends, thank you for listening, and I greatly appreciate all of the support in the podcast. Oh, and one more thing. This is why I should just write this stuff down. I am also uploading the individual episodes of the podcast, about one a day, to the YouTube channel. So if you want to keep up with there instead of your favorite podcast or however, I just want to let you guys know that that's another option. But we won't catch up for a while now because I'm releasing one episode a day. And with that being said, that is everything. Thank you for listening. I will see you guys in the next episode. Have a great weekend, and happy President's Day, and happy Black History Month. We have something coming out for I have people in business with me. I have something else coming out for Black History Month, probably next week, so keep an eye out for that. It's a very interesting letter. All right. Have a great one, folks, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave, while weep the sons of bondage whom he ventured all to save. But though he sleeps, his life was lost while struggling for the slave. His soul is marching on. glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. For his soul is marching on.